Hello and welcome to the Keto Man's Club podcast.
We're glad you're here, where each week we talk about men's health and lifestyle.
We do so with the foundation of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle.
If you don't know what keto is, stick around and you'll find out.
The podcast will bring you real, honest fun.
Each week we strive to uncover the tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday life to maximize your overall health.
Find the clearest path to becoming the best version of yourself that you were meant to be.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Keto Man's Club podcast. My name is Chris. I'm one of your hosts, and as always, I'm joined by Alberto and Jim. How's it going, Alberto?
Doing all right. Had a little bit of a rough week. Had a mysterious flu-like sickness that kind of took over things for a little while. I did get tested, so test came back negative, which apparently means nothing these days, but now at least I got that. Back in action, back at the gym. Week 4 of Danny Vega's carnivore keto cut. Going really well. I'm pretty tired because I've never eaten this little in my adult life, but it's working as advertised, and I'll push through for the next few weeks to see what this thing brings.
Yeah, you're at the lowest that you'll be, and then the way that Danny has it set up is you hang out there for another 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. So this is literally day 1 of my lowest, which is 2,180 calories, proteins at 165, fats at 165, and carbs, since it's carnivore. Today I had 1, but it's usually less than 5.
Very cool. Those are hard macros to keep because that really isn't a lot of food for you, especially for you whenever you've been pretty used to 4,000 calories a day there for a while. Jim, what's going on with you?
I was lamenting before we started recording, cracked my phone this morning, and you feel a little bit handicapped when you can't hit certain parts of the phone, or when you want to try and do something and all of a sudden it takes a life of its own and starts scrolling through things and whatnot. So we're maintaining right now. We're doing the touchless phone situation, kind of like people dealing with COVID. Mm-hmm. Don't touch it, just let it ride kind of thing.
Yeah.
And otherwise good. Last week was a little bit rough personally for some various reasons, and made it through the week, and onward and upward we go. So yeah.
Very good.
And you, sir?
My week has been busy with trying to clean and organize around the house. We sent off our 3 foster kittens back to the shelter to get their surgery and get their new homes, and they are no longer taking up my old office. So I spent a while doing a deep clean of that room because they had taken that over, and well, kittens. It's been a good week overall, though, and getting used to my new schedule. I'm working different days of the week now, so I'm still in that adjustment period. So overall, not too bad. Let's talk about the club news. Actually, by the time this airs, hopefully shirts will be in the mail because he's working on the printing right now. Apparently, that's as we record this. So here in the next week or so, we should hopefully have those off in the mail, going to the folks that bought them. That will be really great to get out the door for them and get some people some steaks over shake shirts. So yeah, that'll be great. And any other important news? I didn't see the numbers as far as how many new members we were talking about this week.
You know what? I didn't look either before we started. We had been up until the last couple of weeks recording on Wednesdays, and in the group we do the hashtag Welcome Wednesday. So that's when I welcome the newest members and whatnot. But the Keto 101 Man's Club continues to really ramp up in the numbers of new members and whatnot. So if you're listening to the podcast for the first time and you pick this episode as the first one, first of all, welcome. But secondly, if you're new to keto, check out the Keto 101 Man's Club. Great opportunity to meet guys, learn about the way of keto and whatnot, and get your feet wet and get settled into this way of eating.
Absolutely. Let's dive into some shout outs. I don't want to drag out our banter here because we've got Dr. Anthony J on the line with us today, and he's waiting patiently in the wings, and we want to get into his story and get into a lot of the information that he has to share. He is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. But Alberto, let's start out with you. Who do you have to shout out this week?
Probably going to ruin the name, but he'll get it. Remember Roderick Nairens, I believe it is, down 90 pounds in a year. Both pictures, he's wearing a kilt, and his killer beard / chops game is on point. So on top of the 90 pounds, the guy's got the style, the guy's got the facial hair. Overall, it's a really great post, and he's killing it.
Yeah, I saw that picture. That was a great example of someone doing things right. And Jim?
I almost I think I know Alberto well enough that I knew that he was going to pick Roderick because that was who I had pulled up as well. But I have a backup here. So every Tuesday we do a Transformation Tuesday post in the group, and have guys post before and after pictures, before and current pictures, things like that. Today when I posted it up, I just said, don't worry about so much the before and after photos. I want to know about the non-physical changes that have come with doing keto. So my shout out are to the guys who posted those non-physical changes, like brain feels good, energy is up, self-esteem is up, mental clarity, from zero confidence to healthy confidence, all these different things that have come about not just on the physical side, but on the mental side as well. So my shout out is to the guys who are seeing changes beyond the belt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much more to this lifestyle, this correction, course correction, whatever you want to call it. There's so much more to it than just getting in shape or losing weight. There's so much more. I am shouting out Mark Sartoris, and he posted a couple pictures here. And he is one of those guys that you look at a picture and you go, nah, that's not the same guy. Like, seriously, he's got a bit of a six-pack poking out there and in the current picture, and he's got muscle definition everywhere. And you can tell he's completely changed over from the rounded out dad bod that was in the before picture there. And good job to Mark. It looks like he's been doing keto for 2.5 years. And let me see if he gives a number of how... No, he's not even. He doesn't even give his weights on here, but there's just a massive amount of weight lost. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just found the picture. I totally would not think that was the same person.
Yeah, definitely. Photoshopped. That's my favorite joke with that type of thing. It's photoshopped. It's not real. Okay, before we dive into our conversation with Anthony, let's go ahead and remind our listeners, your support of the show is huge. If you think that today's conversation, I believe whether you're man, woman, or child, the conversation that we're going to have today is something that you can benefit from. Share this episode with someone. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you can. Subscribe to our Facebook page. Leave a comment there. There's all sorts of different ways that you can get behind us on this. And every week our mission is to share the stories of people that are taking this way of life and using it to transform their own lives. And we're seeing so many different wins on that. We get to share those so often. That's such a huge blessing for sure. The website is theketomansclub.com. So that's the one thing you go there. All of our social media links are there. The Facebook page is there. The Facebook group, everything is right there for you. Okay, let's go ahead and introduce the man himself. Anthony, welcome to the show.
Meet Chris before at like Paleo FX or something?
I believe we did. We met at KetoCon last year.
KetoCon.
Yeah.
I remember your face. Yeah.
Yeah. It was in passing, but you were, I think you were hanging out either close to the Keto Brick booth, which everyone does, or with Danny, one of the two. I couldn't.
Yeah. Both good friends. Yeah. Danny and
Robert both are great.
Robert Sykes. Yeah.
And assuming you walked in, I probably checked your badge at the door.
Oh, rock on. Is that Alberto?
Yeah. Yeah, since I live so close, like I volunteered for the first one, and that pretty much got me like grandfathered in into being able to volunteer from everyone here forward. And I live like 30 minutes from where they host it, so I really can't go wrong.
I heard you when you said you're doing the Danny Vega carnivore keto cut. That piqued my interest because I went hunting with Danny Vega. Did you hear about that?
I saw the vlogs on Robert's channel, and of course I edit for Danny, so I know everything that's going on in their lives.
Nice. Good for you. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely went carnivore that trip. That was crazy.
Yes, that was awesome. If I remember correctly, you guys had the pact that until you had killed something, you weren't going to eat anything, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you got it. Yeah. It's funny because Danny missed 2 shots at Wild Hogs. And then finally, of course, I've shot a lot of them before. So we were trying to get Danny a Wild Hog. And Robert Sykes owns the property, and he's done a lot of hunting as well. But then after that, while Danny was taking a shower one afternoon, I just went out and shot one.
Yeah. Okay. Getting it done. That's all that matters, especially after a couple of days. You're like, okay, we're hungry. We can't be, we can't play favorites here.
It's a good time.
Very cool. Let's give our listeners a little bit of an introduction of who you are. Tell us about who you are, where you're at, where you're from. We'll get into into the backstory here in a bit, but talk about some of that. I should have actually formally introduced you as Dr. Anthony J.
Oh yeah, just for the brand, I like to go by Doctor because people remember it, Dr. J.
Yeah.
But in general, I just prefer Anthony. But it's a fun brand. Shout out to Dr. J.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a researcher. I'm a scientist at Mayo Clinic, PhD in biochemistry from Boston University Medical School. And I went to college in Florida, and I'm a big outdoorsman as well. So a scientist outdoorsman, I guess. I started a shark fishing club in Florida. And so as I travel around and give talks and whatnot, like when I go to Texas, I like to go alligator gar fishing and just do crazy things like that. But obviously really enjoy this staying healthy and staying active and learning a lot about the mechanisms behind things. That's biochemistry. And so right now I'm at Mayo doing research on stem cells. I did a little bit of infrared research, just a lot of different things. I used to do Alzheimer's research. I got my PhD on the topic of hormones and cholesterol and fats. And of course, after that, I wrote a book called Estrogeneration.
You did.
And that's mainly focused on hormones and artificial hormones in particular, which are a big problem. A lot of people aren't even aware of, but you guys certainly are. And I'm glad to hear. And it's it has a big impact.
Absolutely. I've got my metal tumbler, my stainless steel tumbler sitting here in front of me with my water, and I'd use that or a mason jar or whatever I can to use anything but the plastics. We'll talk more. Everywhere. Yeah, we'll talk quite a bit more about that. You also do epigenetic consultation as a part of what you do on the side, right?
Yep, just DNA. I do DNA consulting. Yep, okay. With 23andMe data. And I have a contract with the Special Forces I'm working on right now, and I do a lot of pro athletes, but I also just do regular average people that want to get healthier, and I try and make it reasonably affordable for people to be able to do that. I run sales once in a while, and it's an interesting thing. I love that you guys are doing a Keto Man's Club in general, and it's interesting. One of the common themes that comes up is intermittent fasting. Huge. Like virtually everybody has genes that indicate they should be intermittent fasting. It's the way our ancestors lived. And similarly, virtually everyone has diabetes risk genes, like type 2 diabetes risk genes, which is another indicator that we should not be eating high carb. And yet, virtually everybody is eating high carb. So, and it's different for different people. Some people have an amazing ability to manage carbs, but man, that's rare. And the genetics are a good gateway to find that out, because once you see it in your DNA, it's pretty hard to argue with that. You're programmed to not be loading up on carbs.
Yeah. For those that would be interested in hearing a sample of what you do whenever you examine someone's or DNA, I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes. You guys did a video or a podcast episode that was also a video on Robert Sykes' side of things with the Keto Savage
Keto
brand.
Savage, right?
Yeah, and so you went through both Danny and Robert's DNA with them and the important SNPs that they needed to be aware of that would impact their health and how they could further optimize things. And it's not confidential, so people can learn, because most of the consults I do are confidential, so it's hard for me to communicate. Well, here's the power of some of this stuff. It's not magic. Epigenetics is massively important as well, but the DNA is pretty important, and it's really, your DNA doesn't change throughout your whole life. It was fun, like one of the memorable genes I'm thinking of with Danny Vega. He had a gene that gave him risk for heart palpitations. And creatine is particularly important, as well as sleep. We talked about that on that episode, I remember, because he sent me a text a few months later where he was traveling and he didn't get the sleep that he needed, and his heart gave him some weird heartbeats. And that's always a scary thing. I've had heart palpitations. And again, creatine, what's the best source of creatine? Red meat. So it's another indicator that he's on the right track. Very cool. Yeah. So if people want to see an example, I can think of, that's a really great way to see what a consultation would look like. And I'm sure that you dive even deeper with your consults than what you did on that podcast, because you went relatively quickly through some of that stuff from what I remember. It was interesting stuff for sure. So let's talk a little bit about your story. And you share your story in depth throughout your book, Estrogeneration. So it is one of those things for the people that want the nitty gritty details. go get the book. It's really good, packed full of really great information, but it's also Anthony's story. Tell us a little bit about your story. What was health like growing up? Were you the typical 70s, 80s, 90s kid? What was all that like?
Yeah, wow, interesting. I lived out in the country. I grew up in rural Minnesota, so we had well water and things like that. The interesting thing in America, just to tie it back to the artificial estrogen chemicals, there's a herbicide, second most used herbicide in North America. It's called atrazine. So glyphosate is the number one used herbicide, and that's got its own problems for sure. But the number two is atrazine, and in our area, we certainly have atrazine in the drinking water. It's all over the country in rural areas, and it's completely illegal in Europe, that particular herbicide, because it's so problematic. It acts like estrogen in your body. And just to give people some numbers and give you some numbers, so like natural estrogen is 20 nanograms per liter in men, and in women it's around 220 to 200 depending on the time of the month. The legal allowable limit of atrazine in your drinking water is 3,000 nanograms per liter. Right now, if you put a male frog in 3,000 nanograms per liter of atrazine, you'll transform it into a female. They call it feminization.
This hormone replacement therapy right there.
And that's what I grew up with, but thankfully I didn't have too much of an impact. I mean, my parents have reverse osmosis and things like that, but I had no idea that even in the big cities, there's an issue with estrogens in drinking water in the form of birth control, because the human body doesn't really break down that molecule. So women pee it out, they urinate out the birth control, it goes into the drinking water, and it just gets recycled right back in. They kill the bacteria, they're good at getting rid of the bacteria and the viruses in drinking water, but the hormone, something as small as a hormone, just goes right back into the faucet. So it actually gets condensed a little bit. And so people are drinking quite a bit of birth control, which adds on top of the plastics and the fragrances and the sunscreens and the artificial red dyes and all of these other estrogen chemicals that I write about. So it's additive, right? It's like a 1 + 1 = 5 situation, and they're all acting like estrogen. So if you do a study, like most scientists, you pick one and you study it and you say, yeah, it acts like estrogen. And maybe it's a look, but it acts like estrogen. But most scientists don't put the dots together and say, look, we're getting exposed to this one and this one. And there's a long list. I have a top 10 list in my book, and it's daily exposures. I don't focus, like Agent Orange can screw up your sex hormones, but I don't focus on Agent Orange because hopefully nobody's being exposed to that anymore. It can screw it up for decades, maybe even certainly even generations. It can screw up the next generation, and so can these estrogen chemicals. And that's a problem because people aren't really motivated to change if they don't have an immediate thing. They're not bloated. They don't feel like they have headaches from these chemicals. So they're like, oh, I'm good. I don't have any issues. And so it's not as motivating. But when your testosterone is tanking, that's pretty motivating. So anyway, that's kind of my story, I guess. I kind of got into it. I got into it just from recognizing that these chemicals exist and there's a bunch of them, and nobody was talking about it from that perspective, especially back when I wrote my book. And when 2017, 2016, when I was doing all this research on this specific topic, nobody was saying anything about it. They used to say BPA doesn't leach. I don't know if you remember, like back in the day.
Yeah.
They say BPA is good, it doesn't leach.
And I could be completely off on this, but wasn't there like a thing with people that were like just, for instance, taking like an old Mountain Dew bottle and then just using it as a regular water bottle and then getting like extremely sick from just the constant reuse and over again? Yeah, how could it not? 'Cause those things aren't necessarily designed to be reused over and over again.
Correct. And Ken Berry just sent me something yesterday. I'm sure you guys have heard of Ken Berry. He's a friend of mine. Yeah, he sent me an advertisement, one of these on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. They give you these customized ads, and it was about polyethylene terephthalate. It's called PET. It's a plastic, and how good it is for you. He's interviewed me, and then now he's gotten plastic ads trying to sell them on some plastic products and how it's okay because they're good for you. And the irony is the ad specifically said they don't leach. It's okay. Polyethylene terephthalate, and by the way, they're an estrogen chemical, and the companies are out there saying it's okay, they don't leach. And we've heard this before. It's with BPA. The reason they say that is because these molecules like BPA, they're all linked together. It's called a polymer. So they're linked together. So they said it's not going to leach because you don't have free molecules. You don't have individual molecules. They're all linked together. The problem is you do have free molecules. You do have individual molecules, and they do leach. Because when you manufacture it, you're going to end up with some individual molecules just floating around in the plastic, and quite a lot of them. And the exact same thing is true of phthalates, polyethylene terephthalate. So even when you go BPA free, you still end up with phthalates in your water. And sometimes they make BPS, bisphenol S instead of bisphenol A, and that's just as estrogenic according to studies. So I mean, you start putting this all together, and it's a story that needs to be out. People need to know.
Yeah, I pretty much crammed your book in. It's been on my to listen. I drive a lot for work, to listen to list, and then and so finally Chris just sent me a link so I could listen to it on Audible, and so I pretty much crammed it in since Friday afternoon till today. And like we were talking about earlier, like I'm definitely buying a hard copy because obviously in an audiobook it's hard to go back and reference the information. So I need a hard copy so I can take notes and dog ear some pages and be able to flip through some stuff, but. Yeah, it's that book's 90% terrifying and 10% good news at the end. And for me, it's like when the first thing I thought of once it was over was like I remember like when I first decided to go all in with keto, and it's like you walk into your pantry and you just start looking around. You're like, oh man, no, yeah. So I literally finished the book. The last like 15 minutes of it, I finished today driving home about 4:00. So I literally walk in the house and I'm just looking around my kitchen. And I'm like, we got to make some changes. I'm like, there's a lot of things in here that got to go.
Yeah. That's true. And I just had somebody on Twitter not too long ago say the same thing. They said, I judge a book by how much it's made me change my life. And this one has massively changed my life, right? Something like that. In the last 10 years, this is the most impactful from that perspective. Something along those lines. And it's a slow process for me because I've learned this stuff slowly. But then when you put it all together in a book and then you hit somebody over the head with it, it's a little overwhelming. But it's a good thing to do, man. Especially if you have kids, right? Because you don't want them to be behind the 8 ball with their hormones.
Yeah, and on top of everything else, there's only so much you can control, and I like how you put it in the levels in the book, like levels of how deep you want to take it,
right?
And I mean,
gold,
yeah, exactly, and that was, I think that was genius. And I got 3 kids, and they're 9, 6, and 1.5 now. But by default, they eat extraordinarily clean. Like they're not keto by any stretch, but by default, I do all the cooking, so they do eat extraordinarily clean. And then even my 9-year-old was asking about what the book was, and I'm like, dangers and plastics and what you eat. She just looks down at her little bowl with her little fork, and she looks at me. I'm like, you'll be okay.
We made it this far. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. We're going to get rid of them, but you'll be okay.
It's a process.
Give me a minute. I just finished the book today.
Well, and it's funny because you'll never get rid of them. That's the thing. They're all new, but at least you can minimize it. And then when you do have that occasional exposure, it's not that big of a deal because you don't have 20 other ones hitting or stored up in your fat cells, right?
That kind of was something that I wanted to ask about, that they're always around type thing. How do you know when you are being negatively affected by all of these things? We're bombarded with stuff every day, but when do you realize that you're hitting a wall or that you've had your fill and you've got to do something to correct it?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's hard. That's the hardest part. I think testosterone is a good indicator. If there's one blood marker that's an indicator of how much estrogen you have, the artificial estrogens, it's testosterone. Because I've seen a ton of guys, they'll get all the chemicals out of their system, they'll get rid of the plastics, get rid of the fragrances, whatever, and then they'll measure their testosterone, a before and after situation, and they'll double or whatever. They have a massive spike in their testosterone. And the problem is they may have spiked anyways, but I've seen enough people do that. But there's a gene called CYP1B1. It's a liver enzyme that helps break these chemicals down. And certain people have a bad version of that gene. And of course, that's part of the DNA analysis that I do. I'm looking at that gene, a million other genes. But when people have the bad version of that gene, it's a major risk for gyno, like man boobs, gynecomastia, because they're not breaking down the artificial estrogens. So those guys really see it because, again, they're getting breast tissue development. And that's a tough thing to deal with. But some people never see it until it's decades later or until they just realize they're infertile or the next generation is impacted. Like in the book, I talk a lot about epigenetics and how it's transmissible. It's transmissible to the next generation. And of course, in humans, we don't have a ton of data on that because those studies take hundreds of years or whatever. But in animals like rats and fish and this sort of thing, it's really dramatic. There's a guy named Michael Skinner that did a whole TED talk on it. It's called Ghosts in the Ancestral Genome or some complicated topic like that. But the guy's name is Michael Skinner, and it's Skinner. He's a friend of mine. He's a PhD scientist from Washington, and he literally raises 3,000 plus mice at any given time. Really expensive because he measures the next generation and he exposes them to atrazine and some of these other estrogen chemicals. And he finds massive issues with polycystic ovarian issues and like PCOS and infertility and depression, if you can measure depression in rats. You can certainly measure depression based on suicides in humans, and that goes up when you have birth control use, for example. So there's ways to figure this stuff out. Children, for example, with higher BPA in their urine, they have much higher levels of depression. So there's a number of things you look for. And yeah, that's the problem, is they don't express quickly. It oftentimes takes a long time. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's man boobs pretty quick, but most of the time it takes years. So it makes it a challenge.
Just best to try to be as preventative as possible. And your book is definitely a good reference for that.
Yeah. And
I appreciate it. Yeah.
I do also, and it's good to highlight, it's not all doom and gloom, like Alberto said. At the end of the book, Dr. J does a very good job of going through and making sure that you can pick your plan, so to speak.
Yeah, and achievable stuff too. Nothing that's extraordinarily go out of your way, life changing. If you want it to be that way, you absolutely can. But the stuff that you talk about, even in the bronze level, I don't. If you're keto, I would say pretty much almost halfway there as far as the food goes. And it's just a matter of buying different utensils and eating hardware. You'll be all right.
Exactly.
So,
I was doing a consult with a professional baseball pitcher not too long ago, and he's straight up allergic to soy. And I told him, "You're lucky. Like, that's probably a good thing that you've been allergic your whole life, because he can't even touch stuff." And of course, it's in everything, right? It's in like salad dressings and all this other stuff. And usually it's in the crap, all the processed foods. And it probably brought him to where he is today, because he wasn't able to eat processed foods and all this junk. He had to eat whole foods and decent stuff, and it made a huge impact on his career.
It really is interesting to see that doesn't just affect our health; it can actually affect performance, like you're saying there. I know with me, I'm on TRT. I believe you and I have I've shot questions to you on Instagram a little bit about the estrogen blockers to see if they help at all with the phytoestrogens and things like that. And you said the science is shaky on that. And I luckily am at the point where I don't have to use an estradiol or anything like that to manage my estrogen levels any longer. My estrogen levels are staying pretty steady as of late. It's not 20, but it's about 40 right now from my last blood test. And it's totally within the scope of what's average. Maybe not normal, but
it's good. It's good. I know guys that are 80 that are perfectly fine. Estrogen is protective. Like the natural estrogen is protective against Alzheimer's. It's protective for your arteries. And it's just the artificial ones that are so problematic. And it's when your natural estrogen gets outrageously high. Yeah. If you got 200 estradiol, then let's get a little bit worried. Let's get concerned. But yeah, 40 is good.
Yeah, my highest was probably 65, but I crashed it a couple times and I felt like trash. So that's why I stopped pushing it. I stopped taking the estradiol. I think I stopped taking it, and so that's been for you quite a lot. But yeah, my testosterone now with just 0.7 a week of test SIP, I'm sitting at somewhere between 700 and 900 at any one point in time. Good. Heck, my last test came in at 900, and I hadn't been really very consistent with my schedule. So something's going right in my body. So it's interesting to see what you're talking about and lifestyle changes going side by side with medical intervention like TRT and things like that.
And just so you know, like TRT is especially good for reversing a lot of those epigenetic changes. When you're exposed to BPA and phthalates and some of these sunscreen chemicals, all the stuff we're talking about, it screws up the marks on top of your DNA. And the analogy I use in my book, I think, and certainly the one I use when I go speaking, is piano notes or musical notes. So if you see like a staff with the black lines and you got the note on the lines, if you just have a melody, it's just Mary Had a Little Lamb. But that's your DNA. You can pass that to somebody else. They can play the same song. It's easy. It's simple. It doesn't really change. If you put chords on top of those notes, you put more notes on top of those notes, so it's more complicated. The melody is still there. Same song, same DNA. But now you've got more notes, you've got more complexity. That's your epigenetics. And that also gets passed on. And that can change a lot more without changing your DNA. And these estrogen chemicals screw that up. They change those chords, they change that epigenetics. And a good way to reverse a lot of those negative changes is TRT. That's one of the things I like about it.
Yeah, very cool. I didn't know that. That's very cool. Jim?
Yeah, and I'm a fan of the cream, too. Have you ever tried the cream?
I haven't. I've just been doing test SIP the entire time. I know that the Cream can be good, but we were concerned about my wife coming in contact with it or that type of thing. And then the absorption rate, unless you're doing it directly on areas like the scrotum, it's not super high.
True. Yeah. I've had better luck in terms of response from that for people that I've talked to, and myself personally, I have a prescription. I use it every once in a while. I use it if I throw my back or if I get injured, I accelerate the healing and stuff on it. Backing thing.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. There's nothing better when I throw my low back, which I don't often do anymore. I used to throw it every year. I have a really bad disc issue, but man, it's amazing. It'll usually take me like 2 months to heal without it, and then if I take it, it's a week. It's just ridiculous. But I use the cream. And by the way, little caveat on the cream, a lot of the creams they make, they have artificial estrogen in them as a preservative. Super ironic. They don't all.
Yeah.
One called TRT base is the best. TRT base. If you're a compounding pharmacist or something, or if you want to ask your compounding pharmacist, get that one. It's the only one I know of without the estrogen chemical.
Okay. Interesting.
How do you find a physician, a doctor, or somebody that is a right fit for you if this is something that you think that you need, hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, good question.
The reason I ask is that in the town that I live in, prior to my current job, I used to work for the Chamber of Commerce, and we actually had a testosterone therapy clinic open up. That is what they do. And I'm not going to mention them by name, obviously, or anything, but it almost felt like too much of a convenience store. Like you just walk in and you get with shots and you're good to go. And like, shouldn't you have a little bit more information or something like that? If you determine that it's something that you need, how then do you determine where you get it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, honestly. Like I use Keith Nichols. He's a friend of mine, really good, optimizer. But I think that's the key. You need somebody who's interested in optimizing, not just making you okay. And I'm okay.
What do you mean by an optimizer?
Yeah, exactly. So like the normal range for testosterone in most lab tests is like 300 to 1,000 or something like that, or maybe 250 to 1,000 or whatever. It depends on the company. But if you're coming in with 300, you're way too low. You should be above 500, in my opinion, at any age. I don't care. And everybody's declining. The whole culture, even 25-year-olds are declining from what they historically were. There's a study called the Massachusetts Aging Study. In the 80s, the average male in America was about 500. In the 90s, the average male was about 400. And then 10 years later, in the 2000s, the average was about 300. And that's just all ages. So people say, oh, you have the testosterone of an 8-year-old. The problem is everybody's declining now. And that's a big problem. But another issue is when you first get on it, there's an adjustment period. And most people aren't aware of that. So it takes you like a few months to get your libido lined up and your body gets thrown off a little bit. But you have to ride that out. But if you get something really weird, you want to have a doctor there who knows what they're doing. So an optimizer, right, is somebody who doesn't wait until your testosterone is in the toilet. Like they don't wait until you're in 100 before they're willing to prescribe you. Some people are 500 and they just feel like they have symptoms of low testosterone. And the reason I like the optimizers, the people that are willing to prescribe testosterone to those people and to work with them and make sure that they're healthy, because there's something called testosterone resistance. And I didn't write about this in my book. I probably should have, but the book is focused on estrogen. Testosterone, you've obviously heard of insulin resistance, and your blood sugar's high all the time. You've got really high insulin. It's not even working because the receptors are downregulated. You hardly have any receptors. The receptors are desensitized. They're numb, right? Testosterone, the same darn thing happens. When you have these artificial estrogens, you get testosterone resistance. So one of the estrogens I write about and talk about is oxybenzone, right? It's in the sunscreens. And there's another one called 4-methylbenzoline camphor. You don't have to remember the name. There's no quiz, but
I've been taking notes the whole time. Now tell me there's no quiz.
Well, they did a study after I published my book and told everybody how bad these sunscreen chemicals are. They finally did a study, because some people would say, I don't know about the sunscreen chemicals. I agree with you on everything else or whatever. They did a study now. It was in CNN. It was all over the place. One application of just cheap Walmart sunscreen that's got oxybenzone, just one of these random brands, 7 days later, blood levels of that chemical were above the government's own recommended limits. And by the way, the recommended limits are too high as it is. They should be a lot lower. And so they're like at the cancer levels, right? The levels that eventually cause cancer. One application 7 days later, your blood levels are still above that limit. Major red flag, number one, if you're using cheap sunscreen, you got to switch over to zinc sunscreen or just use a sun shirt or something or both. But those chemicals in particular have been shown 3 things. They lower testosterone. So that's something. They lower your total testosterone. Number 2, they lower your free testosterone, which obviously is a problem. That's the stuff that's working in your body. And then number 3, they block binding to the receptor. That's the worst one of all, because it's like the analogy I use, because I'm in Minnesota and I play hockey. I'm in a hockey men's league, and it's legit. It's got referees and goalies. The whole thing is great. It's fun. It's amazing. It's Minnesota. If you put a piece of plywood in front of the net in a hockey game, it doesn't matter how many players you have on the ice and how many pucks you're shooting at the goal. You're not scoring any goals. If your testosterone is 1,000 and you've got estrogen chemicals blocking binding to the receptor, it doesn't matter that your estrogen is 1,000. You're not having any effect on the receptor. You're not activating the receptor. You're not having any testosterone benefits. You know what I mean? That's the desensitization. That's the numbness. Wow. And so people that are willing to help you optimize your health have recognition of that. And it's a growing recognition. I'm giving a talk in New Mexico in about a month to 200 medical doctors specifically about this topic. Right? I'm actually giving 3 talks to them because it's like a multi-day thing, and it's a really important. Hopefully the knowledge is starting to grow and get out there, but that's why I say optimizer. Long story, right?
No, I appreciate you breaking it down for sure.
Yeah, I totally lucked out. My TRT regimen is completely administered by a physician's assistant at my urologist office. And he is very holistic and everything. He looks at the numbers and everything, but he's like, how do you feel? What's the sex life? Are you having issues with? And he's willing to do blood work with me. And just to go back to what you were saying, just to relate to my experience with it, we did blood work at 3 months, 6 months, and then again after another 6 months after I first started. And in that first year, after a full year of being on a TRT regimen, I finally found that sweet spot. So it takes a while to find the right balance of, okay, how much are we doing? How often are we doing it? I do my 0.7 milliliters split in 2. So I've got a shot that I need to give myself tonight before I go to bed. Those types of things where I am doing 0.3 or something roughly to that extent twice a week. And that gives me where I need to be. But everybody has to find their sweet spot, their sub-Q. There's all sorts of different things that you can do with it as far as TRT regimens. It's not just, hey, take a shot. Very not one size fits all.
Exactly. And some people, they have genetic issues with like their thyroid hormones and stuff. So then they get on TRT and it just never really gets their energy up. They thought it would. And then I do their DNA consult and realize, oh my gosh, it's something totally different. Let's focus on that, right? Because there's a gene, for example, where you have decreased conversion of T4 to T3 thyroid hormone. And then sometimes the doctors will put them on T4, like they'll prescribe them T4, a thyroid hormone, but because they don't even convert T4 to T3, the thyroid hormone doesn't even work because they're giving them the wrong one. So they're just like guessing and trying all kinds of different stuff, and their life is, just in shambles. They don't have any energy. It can be a difficult, challenging situation, but it sounds like you're kicking ass. So that's good.
It's starting to work, or it's been working now for a couple of years. So.
Yeah, Chris is our resident specialist.
That's good. Yeah.
So we're going to try to shift gears here a little bit, and some we were just talking about a little bit prior to going live here. But we were talking about food and packaging and plastic and Chinese takeout and Tupperwares and lids. In your book, you talk about how fats, particularly animal fats, are susceptible to absorbing these things. And like you said, you can't avoid it. It's everywhere. Like I bought a quarter steer. Obviously, it all comes shrink wrapped in plastic and it sits in the freezer. And so first question is, in that exact scenario, I bought a steer. They pretty much package it, freeze it almost immediately. It stays frozen until I cook it. Right. Is there any kind of impact difference with it being frozen? And a follow-up to that question, just because I'm curious and I don't like them anyways, is how do you feel about those sous vide? I don't even know what they're called.
Chipotle does. I talked to one of their consultants about this, but because he contacted me and did a consult on this, but because when I do keto when I travel, I oftentimes do like barbacoa at Chipotle with sour cream and guacamole and cheese, and that's it. I do that all the time. That's like my go-to. I don't know what you guys. Do you guys have a go-to when you travel? It's hard.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm going back to the. But I'm just
we-
curious. I want to learn from you.
We live in Texas.
Yeah, we live in the land of barbecue.
Right.
But honestly, what I travel for work quite a bit, and honestly, what I've been doing, it's been especially easy now since hotels are pretty much wide open. But I've just been booking rooms that have kitchenettes that are near grocery stores, but I'll go buy some frozen hamburgers or some and try to keep it as clean as possible.
Nice.
And that's been working out real well. Like I'll just buy like half a dozen eggs, a stick of butter, and I used to do a pack of bacon, but bacon in a hotel room just gets too messy. For the price of going out to eat,
your house.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. For the price of going out to eat, I can get twice as much food and just not have to worry about being social.
Sure. Yeah.
I Five Guys into the equation also. That's a good resource.
Just the patties type deal.
You can do the bunless burger. They serve it in a nice little bowl. You can get extra bacon. There's no extra cost for it. You get extra cheese. There's no extra cost for it. So it can be a nice fix.
Yeah, and they serve in a tinfoil bowl, so it's recyclable, but it's also not something that's obviously
maybe
estrogen.
They do that in Texas, but not in Indiana.
Got to get on their case. That's good. Yeah, I like that. So the leaching, right, with the plastics and the meat wrapping. Because I'm a hunter, I shot 7 deer last year, 5 deer the year before. In Minnesota, I've got a bunch of kids though, so it's different. But in Minnesota, they have regions in the state where you can shoot unlimited deer and just donate them to soup kitchens and things. But with as many kids as I have, I keep them and I do all the butchering myself. But I shrink wrap them myself. And if you do it yourself, by the way, I wrap it in silicone. I wrap it in baking paper, like butcher paper, and then I freeze wrap it in plastic. But the main thing is, more importantly, if you're freezing something, there's almost no transfer of estrogen. So temperature makes a huge difference. Temperature is one of the most important. So there's 3 variables: temperature, duration, and oiliness. So temperature, if it's hotter, molecules move faster, and you'll get a lot more transfer of estrogens into liquids, right? Solids, you're not really going to get transfer, just liquids. Like if you got a dry piece of bread in a plastic jar, even if the jar is hot, you're not going to get transfer of estrogens. It's a dry piece of bread. But if you put a hot bowl of soup in a plastic Tupperware thing, you're going to get transfer of estrogen. So heat matters. Next thing, duration. If it's in there a long time, you're going to get more estrogen, of course. Third thing is the oiliness. So how hydrophobic is the technical term. The more oily something is, the more estrogen transfer you get. So if you've got olive oil in a plastic container, that's problematic because it's an oil. Whereas water, still problematic, but less than olive oil because it's not an oil. So there's less transfer of estrogens. And by the way, most of these animal studies they do with mice and things like that, they're done when they test quote unquote fats, like good fats versus bad fats. When we order fats to the lab and we study animals, they ship them in these big plastic tubs and things. So a big issue in research, they're giving these animals fats and saying the fats are bad, but a lot of times they're actually researching the estrogen chemicals that are coming along for the ride in the fats. And as a proof of that, speaking of atrazine, because I brought it up a few times, they did a study because a lot of people say, well, just count calories and you'll lose weight or whatever. They did a study with rats. They had 2 groups of rats, gave them the exact same diet, which you can do with rats. Everything exactly the same. The only difference was one group, they put low dose atrazine in their drinking water. The other got purified water. The group with low dose atrazine got fat. Same calories, right? So it makes a difference. And I emphasize low dose atrazine because they didn't like blast them with super high dose. They gave them like a relevant dose that humans get exposed to. But the back to your question, right? The 3 things: duration, time, oiliness, heat. Heat.
And are there some fats that work better? Are less likely to have that leaching effect than others? Or is animal fat better than? Obviously, none of us are going to advocate for vegetable oils. We don't need the chemical, I'm going to say it, chemical shit show that those are.
I agree.
And we just got the explicit rating.
Yeah,
yeah, no, it was worth it. Not that I know of. I don't know that there's a difference.
Okay.
But animal fats are certainly solid at a lower temperature.
Okay.
Like butter at room temp is solid, whereas olive oil would be liquid. So there's going to be less transfer into solid. So animal fats would be better. But if you're heating it up, I wouldn't heat up animal fats in plastic for sure.
Yeah.
So no hot water baths for extended periods of time?
plastic. Yeah, and butter is fine. If butter is wrapped in plastics, but it's solid, it's fine as far as I'm concerned.
The one thing that I'll say for you, Alberto, I know that they make silicone bags for the sous vides.
Oh, that's what I forgot about the sous vide. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I have silicone bags. There's a company called Stasher. Thanks for bringing that back up, Chris. Yep. Good call. It's a great way to cook, but you definitely can't use plastic Ziploc bags, which a lot of people do. It's insane to me.
It's just like, I have a background in automotive painting. Speaking of toxic chemicals that will ruin your life, but I mean, from day one, like the first thing they teach is when you go to put a bumper on a car, bumpers either come primed, which you can just sand and paint, or they come raw plastic, which means they pop them out of the mold, and then you get the bumper. And in order to make paint stick to the bumper, you got to sweat them. So either you got to put them outside in the hot sun for a while, or you run them through a bake cycle. And obviously, you're well aware that what it does is it takes all those mold release agents and forces them out to the surface. Then when you take the bumper out, you give it a good cleaning and you wipe off all these mold release agents. And I was like, I'm talking about painting bumpers on your car. I mean, you're talking about putting food in a plastic bag and boiling it. And I'm like, I'm going to take my experience with plastics from painting cars and apply it to this, because if it's bad news over here, I'm going to assume it's bad news to put in my mouth.
Exactly. That's funny. Yeah, they used to, speaking of painting, there's a bunch of these marine paints that they outlawed that because they were killing off coral reefs and whatnot, oysters, and they're so toxic. Like one of them is called tributyl tin, TBT. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or used it, but they outlawed it on boats and things like that, but they still allow it on cooking utensils, cooking spatulas and things like that.
Oh, that's amazing.
So thankfully they've gotten better in recent years, but it's some of our chemical issues in America. All this stuff is illegal in Europe. And that's one of the things I do in my book is I try and do a compare and contrast between Europe versus America, because it's so stark. It's so different. It's so insane.
To drag on the car painting thing, even as far as EPA regulations and safety, like personal safety, like we are way behind the ball on stuff like that too. Like it's not even funny. Like the minimal amount required in most places in this country to paint a car, as far as PPE goes, is literally the equivalent of like maybe just putting a simple little cloth mask over your face and walking into a paint booth full of overspray that is extremely toxic because it's literally meant to stop your car from rusting. And then you go up to Canada. Canada is a whole different monster. Like up there, you can't even paint unless you have a supplied fresh air system, which is a fresh air pump outside of the paint booth that's pumping air into a mask from a separate source other than where you're standing. And the same goes for Europe. Like they've been following these things for years, but then over here, here's this little cartridge mask, stick this to your face, your eyes are exposed, carry on.
Yeah, this guy I mentioned before, I think who gave the TED talk out from Washington, Michael Skinner, he gave a talk in Europe about these chemicals and about the estrogen, the epigenetic impact, how it gets transmitted to future generations, some of these health problems. And 2 weeks later, they outlawed that chemical. It was a fungicide he was talking about. And this was like 5 years. That chemical is still legal in America. Like they still use it. Speaking of fungicide, mold inhibitors, it's ridiculous. And it's just a money influence thing. People always ask me why that situation is what it is, because there's a lot of money in our political system that influences these politicians. It's financial. Yep. But that gives you incentive to basically you got to take it into your own hands, because clearly in America, the government's really not going to protect you in a lot of these things. They do in certain aspects, but definitely not as to the level that they should. And so you really got to do it yourself. DIY.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that we have to figure out for ourselves. We're especially
in the diet too, right?
In the diet too.
Food pyramids, baby.
Oh yeah. I saw.
Grain up.
I'm not going to take it down the path that it could go, but I saw a post the other day that said that there's some. I can't remember if it was some organization or just it was an opinion piece of we should give the government ultimate control over what we eat. I'm like, heck no.
Yeah.
No.
How's that been going for us?
Yeah, not going there. No, not going there.
Well, Mayo Clinic, of course, they have soda fountains at all I'm employed there, and they've got soda fountains everywhere. And they had a poster. You guys will appreciate this. Most people I talk to, I can't tell the story because they don't really appreciate it. But they had a poster about how you should decrease your meat consumption, eat more grains. And I took a picture of it and put it on Twitter and said, this is basically anti-science. And even if you're just to globally say that, just think of somebody with celiac, right? Like you can't make such a ridiculous overarching statement, even if it's a little bit true. And it's not even a little bit true, but So I put it on there and basically said something like, this isn't scientific, this whatever. And they had 3 HR reps. I got called into an office and I'm like, what's going on? 3 HR reps sitting around a table basically told me, look, you're not representing Mayo properly, this and that. It was pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah, I bet that was. And there's just so much, you're exactly right that if you lump everybody into the same thing and saying that everyone needs to take in more grains or that type of thing, that really does. Everyone that's gluten sensitive, which is for a lot of people is something that they've developed because of overeating the gluten. That's a whole other different discussion. But there's just so much, there's so many different factors there. I definitely don't need grains and whatnot in my diet because I will absolutely just start gaining weight because of it will happen. Yep. I'm still 3 years into my keto journey. I'm still not completely, I still have some insulin resistance. I still have the ability to feel the effects in a very visceral and real way of carb intake. So I'm staying away from it. I'm mainly carnivore right now, and it's been great. So let's talk about what you eat in a regular day. You were saying that right now that you cycle a little bit, but currently you're on a ketogenic cycle right now. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, all my life I've skipped breakfast. I've never eaten breakfast. So I do the noon to 6 feeding window. I basically just eat lunch and eat dinner because I'm actually pretty damn sensitive to gluten. And when I was a kid, I didn't know that, but I would get stomach. All my parents have is cereal. Even to this day, I go to their house and I got stomach aches. I definitely remember that, but I didn't attribute it to anything. I just stopped eating breakfast. And to this day, I hate eating breakfast. I'm not hungry. It's gross. It just feels gross, even if I eat something healthy. So I just don't do that. At lunchtime, when I'm on the road, oftentimes I'll do a keto brick. If I'm at home, I generally just do egg yolks. That's my go-to when I'm keto. I throw out the egg whites oftentimes. I'm actually sensitive to egg whites, but even if I wasn't, I probably would when I'm doing because I do a pretty strict keto and I go keto. For dinner, I generally eat venison, or say last night I had snapping turtle. And actually, when Danny Vega and Robert Sykes and I were hunting, we had gar eggs. We caught a bunch of fish, and of course we ate fish, but some of them had eggs, and we ate the gar eggs, and Danny was puking. He got sick. And we thought it was because we were siphoning gas from the car over to the ATV and we were sucking in gas. And it's really, well, some people are just more sensitive to gas. But I did a little, I found out later from somebody that gar eggs have a toxin in them. So don't eat gar eggs. They're apparently poisonous. So we learned the hard way. So you got to be a little careful when you're doing the wild game thing. But yeah, just a lot of wild game, like basically pretty carnivore, to be honest, for dinners with as much fat as I can think up, like butter. I love butter. I'm a big butter guy. Bacon for sure. What else do I do? I had some avocado tonight. So tonight I basically had taco meat, taco seasoning. I just do different seasonings, things like that. Sometimes I do like a cauliflower pizza crust type deal with mozzarella cheese and cauliflower, and my kids love it. I've got some smoked salmon in the fridge. A lot of fish. I do a lot of fish because I do a lot of fishing. It's pretty simple, and I like it that way.
Simple works. So right now, I'm more cycle 2. Obviously, what do you eat? I'm like beef, eggs, a little bit of pork. Pretty much covers it.
Yeah, you've been doing ham steaks almost every day.
Yeah, only because I'm freaking counting my calories and I'm trying to get the most out of every single one. And they don't taste bad. Of course, they come in plastic, but I pulled it out of the fridge today and I'm like,
it's our world.
It is.
Sometimes they inject, like in some of the chicken breasts and stuff, they inject phthalates. They have to, because I've seen them, and they inject a liquid substance, and they have phthalates they sometimes use as preservatives because bacteria refuse to eat them. They even have them in, if you look on the labels for like corn tortillas or something, you'll see some of these estrogen chemicals literally on the label. Sometimes they put them on the label, sometimes they don't. But a lot of the vegans like to point that out and say, look at all the phthalates in the meat. They point out the chicken studies and things. And I think they're literally injecting them in some of those. So you got to be careful. Like the chicken is, of course I hunt. I sometimes buy half a cow or a whole cow or whatever, and I get them from farmers that I know. I use the Weston A. Price Foundation group, by the way. They have an amazing group across the country that has farmers that generally know what they're doing in terms of free ranging and not feeding them grains and all this. So I just tap into my local chapter, and all around the country they have local chapters, and you can meet the farmers. And I got my last whole cow for $1,600, whole cow, all butchered.
Wow.
Which of course is, you're not going to find that in most places. But and then I get chickens directly from the farmer, and they're phenomenal. You go to their yard, they're running all over the place, and they're just free range chickens. So I'm a little picky about all that stuff. But
What was the name of this outfit again?
Weston A. Price Foundation.
They are a lot behind the paleo movement.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to paleo in terms of their diet, except they're a little more lax on some of the grains and stuff like that if you ferment them and this and that. But they're really organized, particularly with the farmers that are doing good work. They're actually ethical, and like the Joel Salatin types. And I speak at their conference most years around the country. They have a big conference, and yeah, it's good. It's a good thing to check into for if you're going to buy a cow and you don't have any knowledge of the local farmers. Just go to Facebook, shoot them a message, try and find out who's your local leader.
No, that's cool. I'll definitely check that out. Like I got lucky, and like one of the guys that I do a bunch of side work with, his dad actually has a really small private ranch, and he only has about a dozen head of steer. So it's basically we pretty much got to go around his schedule when they're ready to slaughter. But I am slowly working my way up his totem pole to where I'm actually getting the calls when he's going to send them to slaughter versus, hey, everybody that wanted some bought some. I still got some in my freezers. Are you interested? So I'll take it either way, but it's nice to work my way up the totem pole and be getting the pick of the litter, so to speak.
Yeah. I'm looking for, when I go to the farm, I'm looking for, are these things out in the field? Eventually, again, I hunt so much, it doesn't even, like I've shot multiple moose over the years and a lot of bear and antelope, and obviously, like I say, 7 deer this past year. So I'm still loaded up on deer meat. And that's a really affordable way to do it. Like deer tags are $20. So that's for a full deer. It's a lot of meat. Eventually, if I do buy a cow or if I raise my own, I'll just butcher it myself. I'm comfortable doing that. And it's not that hard. You don't have to know all the fancy cuts, and you don't really need a butchering saw and all the fancy shenanigans. You can just start hacking off meat, throw it and do a little bit of research, maybe watch a couple of YouTube videos, but honestly, not that big of a deal if you just got a big pile of meat in some of those big stainless steel mixing bowls or whatever, and you're vacuum sealing it and freezing it.
I think that just became the title of our show, A Big Pile of Meat. Hey, I want to ask something to shift gears back to testosterone again, because this is something that I'm working through personally as well. There's a lot of, from what I have done in my research, a lot of concern that once you go on, you don't come back, so to speak. Like this is a lifelong commitment kind of thing. Okay, so tell us why that rumor is out there from your perspective, why it is not true from your perspective. Do some people just have different thoughts on that? So I'd like to hear what you say about that.
Yeah, it depends. Most people just enjoy it so much. They enjoy the benefits of it and whatnot. And it's almost like being a little bit younger. Like when you're younger, your metabolism is higher. You can get away with cheating in your diet a little bit more, things like that. So people like it so much they rarely go off it, but that doesn't mean you can't. You just want to slowly go off it if you do. The thing is, most of that comes from the bodybuilders who literally can't go off it because their body has stopped producing testosterone completely. But like, for example, I go off it all the time because, again, I only go on it when I completely destroy my back or something like that. And I have a specific gene. It's called interleukin-1 alpha, and the interleukin is inhibited by testosterone. So we have like over 20 interleukins. So interleukin, have you ever heard of the cytokine storm? When people get COVID, sometimes they call it the cytokine storm. It's like a storm of inflammatory chemicals. You guys ever heard that term, cytokine storm? Yeah. It just basically means your body is creating all kinds of cytokines, all kinds of inflammatory chemicals causing inflammation. And there's a bunch of different cytokines. One's called TNF alpha, one's called interleukin, one's called interferon. And interleukin, which I mentioned again, I have a genetic issue. It's interleukin 1, interleukin 2, interleukin 3. There's a whole ton of them. And the interleukin 1 alpha in particular is in your discs in your back, and it triggers a lot of inflammation. And testosterone shuts that down, shuts that off. So for me, it's pretty specific for my back. So again, I can get it on it. And also I tinker, right? Because I want to know, can I go on it for 6 months and then jump off it, wean off it, like slowly cut the dose in half and then just go to quarter dose and then go off in the course of a month, and it's no issue. And I've done that. I do that. And you feel a little crappy initially. You get a little bit of extra weight gain, like water retention changes a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. Like you can definitely get off it.
Okay.
So it helps if you got more muscle mass too. The problem is like a lot of people don't build muscle mass, and muscle mass is another great equalizer that allows you to get away with more stuff and it allows you to get off it better. But
that, I mean, so I have my suggestions what we got from Jonathan Shane, who has been managing his low testosterone through relatively natural means, supplementing different materials based on whatever he's high or low, and trying to manage it that way, and doing so quite effectively. What are your, from the hormonal side, from the deep science side that you're in, what are some of the more natural, or you can do this just by supplementing X, Y, or Z things that guys should do that maybe that don't even require blood work, or don't even, these are just good things, good habits to have just in case, to be able to do or to manage testosterone levels and give yourself the best natural boost possible?
Yeah, zinc is probably the easiest one. And of course, there's a lot of zinc in red meat. If you're eating over 100 grams of red meat, you should be fine. But that's one of the beauties of carnivore and keto. Most people, when they go on keto, their testosterone goes way up. And they've done studies, because the scientists are always mystified. The normal scientists, they're like, how come eating animals is supposed to be so bad for you and people's testosterone is doubling? But it does happen a lot when you change your gut bacteria and things. You improve your gut bacteria. Another one is just training hard, like lifting heavy, particularly with your legs. That seems to be especially effective for increasing testosterone, squatting, things like that.
Big muscles. Yeah.
It definitely, infrared, of course, a little bit less natural, but if you just get out in the sunshine, that helps. Vitamin D helps, but that's, again, sunshine. You can literally do infrared right on your balls. I'm sure you've heard of this.
Yes, I have.
And it does work. It works for me. It's a pain in the ass.
You may be doing it wrong.
It's funny, they did an infrared study on so infrared, it goes 3 inches through your skull. They've done human cadaver studies, so it goes even through skull. They did a study with mice, and they wrapped their heads with tin foil, like literally like tin foil hats. And they had 3 groups. One did not get any infrared, and they all get Alzheimer's, because these are like Alzheimer's mice. And then the other group got full body exposure to infrared, like once a day for however long, and they had massively improved, less plaques in their brain, less Alzheimer's symptoms, all this stuff. The third group, the tinfoil hat group, obviously wasn't getting any infrared on their heads, but they were getting infrared on the other parts of their body. They also had improvements. They didn't have maximal improvements like full body infrared, but they still had a lot of improvements. Off topic from testosterone, but I imagine just getting infrared anywhere in your body, and again, sunshine does that. That's the cheapest way to get infrared, is good for people. And like I say, vitamin D. Have you heard of Tongkat Ali?
No.
Tongkat Ali, Tongkat Ali. It's very well established in peer-reviewed studies that it bumps your testosterone, at least like usually about 30+%. 40%, something like that. It's honestly, though, it's literally as expensive as just getting testosterone prescription to get the really good quality stuff, but it does work, and you don't have to go and find a doctor and all that. Works for a lot of people. Boron helps for testosterone. Boron increases your free testosterone in particular. So similar to zinc, it gets that testosterone off of SHBG, if you know what SHBG is. Magnesium, too. 70% of Americans are straight up deficient in magnesium, depending on how you define deficient. And the other thing is avoidance, right? Like obviously just avoiding the estrogen chemicals that I write about and talk about, that's a massive component. I've seen so many people double their testosterone. It's not even funny. I had a guy on Instagram tag me to a story yesterday where he had a massive boost in his testosterone. And we've done a podcast. He's from the UK because he did it. He was skeptical. And he's like, I don't think this is real. And so he tested his blood, got off all the estrogen, and then he's had me on his podcast because it actually worked. It gave him like a 60% increase in his testosterone. But another one that's overlooked besides just the estrogen chemicals that, again, you guys all know about because you read my book, a lot of the metals decrease testosterone. And most people don't realize that, because if you take a multivitamin, you'll have like nickel and vandate and tin and all these like micro minerals, and they call them like they call them micronutrients and things like that a lot of times. But most of those decrease testosterone, at least in animal studies. Of course, most of them they haven't tested on humans. Like aluminum, certainly. Like I would get rid of the aluminum deodorants and go with a magnesium deodorant, which I have one on my website, ajconsultingcompany.com. You can find like the deodorants that I like and all that stuff. But like a zinc deodorant or magnesium deodorant actually works. Most of the glycerol deodorants just don't work. That's why people use aluminum deodorants, but the problem with aluminum is it gets into your bloodstream, and scientists used to scoff at that, but now they actually finally did the study and it's been proven that it does go into your blood. And that one certainly lowers your testosterone. Most of the metals, except for, like I say, zinc, magnesium, calcium, those ones do not lower it. They increase it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a few
Very
things.
Cool. And I think we could probably pick your brain for hours on end, and we want to respect your time. So we'll go ahead and start winding things down a little bit at this point. But just there's a lot here, and maybe we'll just have you come back on, and maybe we can either target and whatnot. So go ahead, and you plugged it just a second ago. I'll add to that. Not only do you have your suggestion of the deodorant, but you have all sorts of suggestions of your brands, your products that you're like, okay, I found that this is good, along with your top 10 and your bronze, silver, and gold. You've got all sorts of different resources on your website. Go ahead and plug that again, and then give us some contact information of how people can get in contact with you.
Yeah. Even the contact info is there. It's at ajconsultingcompany.com. You have to spell out the word company. It's a terrible website name. I'm a horrible marketer. I came up with the name in 2010. I had a government contract. I was designing viruses that were like protective against Alzheimer's. So
it doesn't sound shady at all.
Right now, right? I was literally designing and making viruses from DNA, and they were for curing Alzheimer's in animals, and you like drill a hole in their brain and inject the viruses in their heads and all this crazy stuff. And I had a contract with the government to do this, and they were like, "What's your business name?" When I was like setting up this government contract, there's a website called SAM, like SAM, and I'm like, AJ Consulting Company, and that's literally like where it came from. And so then I got the website, and that's my bad marketing. But
there's no going back now.
Now you can't go back, exactly. But yeah, the info, I'm pretty easy to find on there.
Yep. Yeah. And you're active on your Instagram, which
Sure. Anthony GJ.
Yeah, that's right.
I had the middle initial, because people snagged the other versions.
Yeah. You're pretty available, like you said. And we really appreciate you taking the time tonight to join us and have this conversation. We will likely have you on again, and maybe we'll be a little more targeted in the future. But this was a really great starter conversation. Because I hope that our listeners will hear this and their eyes and their ears will be open to, okay, let's try to further optimize health, because that's what we're doing when we're doing keto. We're optimizing health, and this is just one more layer to that particular onion.
Thanks, and keep up the good work, guys. I like this. I like the idea of a Keto Man's Club, and I like the name. Yeah. You guys are doing great work, so keep it up.
It's a pleasure having you here. A reminder to our listeners, all of our social contacts, whether it be the podcast, the hosts, our Facebook groups, the Facebook page, everything is available at theketomansclub.com. And you can get in contact with us a couple other ways. If you want to give us a phone call, you can call and leave a voicemail at 512-518-6161. Or you can email us at ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com. So we're pretty available as well. Feel free to reach out, and we'd love to hear from you, the listener. And if you think that the information that was shared today by Dr. J in this episode is going to be beneficial to someone, please share it, because we want to get this in front of as many people as possible. So that's it for this week. Until next week, make sure to eat meat, lift heavy, sleep, and repeat. Thank you for joining us for the Keto Man's Club podcast. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Would you help us spread the word about the Keto Man's Club by sharing with your friends and family? We're available on all podcast platforms, so just search for Keto Man's Club and you'll find us. If you would like to connect with us, you can do so a number of ways. Our web address leads to our Facebook group, theketomansclub.com. That's TheKetoMansClub.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Keto Man's Club Podcast. Lastly, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out via email to ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to hanging out with you again next week.